As the sun began to set on the towering skyscrapers of Wall Street, I found myself trapped in a twisted web of toxicity. I was an ambitious young professional, eager to climb the corporate ladder, but little did I know what awaited me within the cold confines of my workplace. It all began when I landed a coveted position at a prestigious investment firm. The office, an embodiment of corporate power, hummed with frenetic energy. I was determined to prove my worth, but I soon discovered that success came at a high price. My boss, Mr. Morgan, was an enigma wrapped in an expensive suit. With his piercing eyes and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, he exuded an unsettling aura. It didn't take long for me to realize that his mood shifted like a pendulum, swinging wildly between charm and venom. One moment, he would be the epitome of a charismatic leader, captivating the boardroom with his eloquence. But as soon as the doors closed, his true colors emerged. His temper, a relentless storm, rained down on his subordinates, eroding our confidence and leaving us trembling in fear. On any given day, the atmosphere in the office was suffocating. The sound of shattering glass from a thrown paperweight would echo through the hallways, followed by the hushed whispers of terrified colleagues. We tiptoed around, afraid to make even the smallest mistake that would trigger his wrath. Mr. Morgan's toxicity extended beyond verbal abuse. He played mind games, manipulating us like pawns in his grand chessboard. He would assign impossible tasks, dangling the promise of a promotion like a carrot in front of our weary eyes. Our mental health deteriorated, suffocated by his demands and relentless criticism, but the toxicity didn't stop at the office walls. Mr. Morgan's hold on our lives extended into our personal spaces. Late-night phone calls, demanding our presence at a moment's notice, disrupted our sleep and shattered any semblance of work-life balance. We became slaves to his whims, sacrificing our own well-being to feed his insatiable appetite for power. As the months turned into years, the toxic environment ate away at my soul. The stress consumed me, and I found myself on the edge of a precipice, teetering between sanity and madness. The line between day and night blurred, mirroring my boss's own manic episodes. Then, one fateful day, a glimmer of hope emerged. Rumors circulated that a renowned psychiatrist was offering therapy sessions to those suffering from workplace trauma. Desperate for respite, I made an appointment, clinging to the faint possibility of reclaiming my life. The psychiatrist, Dr. Anderson, listened intently as I poured out my heart, describing the horrors of working under Mr. Morgan's tyrannical rule. With each word, the weight on my shoulders grew lighter, and a flicker of strength ignited within me. But the most shocking revelation awaited me at the end of our session. Dr. Anderson, the compassionate listener who understood the depths of my suffering, leaned forward and whispered, "I am Mr. Morgan's brother." The room spun around me, and my heart pounded in my chest. Dr. Anderson explained that he had spent years trying to help his brother, to no avail. The toxicity that consumed Mr. Morgan's soul had seeped into every aspect of his life, destroying everything in its path. The psychiatrist, Dr. Anderson, listened intently as I poured out my heart, describing the horrors of working under Mr. Morgan's tyrannical rule. With each word, the weight on my shoulders grew lighter, and a flicker of strength ignited within me. But the most shocking revelation awaited me at the end of our session. Dr. Anderson, the compassionate listener who understood the depths of my suffering, leaned forward and whispered, "I am Mr. Morgan's brother." The room spun around me, and my heart pounded in my chest. Dr. Anderson explained that he had spent years trying to help his brother, to no avail. The toxicity that consumed Mr. Morgan's soul had seeped into every aspect of his life, destroying everything in its path. In that moment, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The irony was chilling. The one person who understood the torment I endured was related to the source of my anguish. The revelation left me shaken, but it also fueled my determination to escape the clutches of toxicity. I knew then that I had to sever the chains that bound me to Mr. Morgan and his twisted world. With renewed courage, I devised a plan to free myself and my colleagues from the suffocating grip of his toxic reign. Gathering evidence of Mr. Morgan's abusive behavior became my mission. I discreetly recorded his explosive outbursts, gathered testimonies from fellow coworkers, and documented the toll it had taken on our mental and physical well-being. The pieces of the puzzle fell together, forming a damning picture of his true character. Armed with this irrefutable proof, I reached out to the higher-ups in the company, bypassing Mr. Morgan's influence. The revelation shook the foundation of the firm, as the evidence I presented painted a clear picture of the toxicity that had infected our workplace. The board, faced with the undeniable truth, had no choice but to take action. Mr. Morgan's reign of terror came to an abrupt end as he was stripped of his power and position within the company. The toxic cloud that had loomed over us for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of relief and liberation. In the aftermath, the company implemented comprehensive measures to address workplace toxicity and ensure the well-being of its employees. Counseling services, support networks, and strict anti-harassment policies were put in place to prevent such atrocities from happening again. As for me, I took time to heal from the scars inflicted by Mr. Morgan's toxicity. The experience had left me shaken, but it also forged within me a resilience I never knew I possessed. I vowed to use my voice and newfound strength to advocate for healthier work environments, to stand up against toxic bosses who abuse their power. The road to recovery was long and arduous, but eventually, I emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. I found solace in knowing that my actions had not only freed myself but also paved the way for a healthier, more compassionate workplace. The toxic chapter of my life was finally closed, and as I gazed out at the bustling streets of Wall Street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The shadows of the past had been replaced by the dawn of a new era, one where the toxic power games were challenged, and the voices of the oppressed were heard. And so, I walked away from that chapter of my life, forever changed by the harrowing experiences I had endured. The story of the bipolar toxic boss and his reign of terror became a cautionary tale, a reminder that we must never surrender our well-being in the pursuit of success. I remember the day I started working at Lancaster & Company, a prestigious law firm nestled in the heart of the city. Little did I know that my new boss, Mr. Charles Harrison, would be a personification of nightmares and toxicity. On my first day, I was greeted by a seemingly charming man with a perfectly tailored suit and a disarming smile. His voice oozed confidence as he welcomed me to the firm. "You'll do just fine here," he said, patting me on the back. But as the days passed, I soon discovered his true nature. Mr. Harrison's mood swings were like a roller coaster ride. One moment, he would shower praise and encouragement, making you feel invincible. But the next, he would unleash his wrath, tearing apart your work with cruel precision. I often found myself walking on eggshells, never knowing which version of him I would encounter. His office was a shrine to his ego, adorned with accolades and awards. But amidst the grandeur, there were hints of his sinister nature. I once caught a glimpse of a photograph tucked away on his desk. It was a group picture, but every face was scratched out, except for his. A chilling reminder that he was the center of his universe, and we were merely pawns in his game. The toxicity spread like a virus throughout the office. Coworkers whispered in hushed tones, sharing their horror stories of Mr. Harrison's unpredictable behavior. We were trapped in a web of fear and despair, silently enduring his abuse. But it wasn't until that fateful night when I discovered the truth behind Mr. Harrison's madness. It was late, and I had returned to the office to retrieve a forgotten file. As I made my way through the dimly lit corridors, I heard a faint noise coming from his office. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer, hiding in the shadows. Through a small crack in the door, I witnessed a sight that chilled me to the core. Mr. Harrison was alone, his face contorted with rage. He was arguing with himself, switching between two distinct personalities. One moment, he was the charming boss, the next a deranged monster. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Mr. Harrison was battling his own demons, trapped in a relentless cycle of mania and depression. His toxic behavior was a manifestation of his bipolar disorder. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. My sympathy for him grew, but so did my fear. How could I possibly work under someone so unpredictable, someone battling their own internal torment? I knew then that I had to escape, for my own sanity and well-being. I handed in my resignation the very next day, unable to face Mr. Harrison any longer. As I walked out of Lancaster and Company for the final time, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Despite the toxicity, I couldn't shake off the haunting image of Mr. Harrison, a victim of his own mind, trapped in a perpetual nightmare. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about the hidden demons that can lurk beneath even the most polished exteriors. It reminded me to tread carefully and treat others with kindness, for we never truly know the battles they may be fighting within. And as I moved on to a healthier work environment, I vowed to never let toxicity consume my own spirit, no matter the circumstances. I remember the day I started working at Pearson Corporation like it was yesterday. The imposing glass building stood tall against the gray sky, its cold, sterile atmosphere sending a shiver down my spine. Little did I know that beneath the polished surface, darkness lurked, ready to consume me. My boss, Mr. Pearson, was an enigmatic figure. Tall and slender, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to bore into your soul, he exuded an aura of authority. At first, I admired his sharp wit and keen intellect. But as time went on, I discovered a side to him that sent chills down my spine. There were days when Mr. Pearson would burst into my office, his face flushed with anger. He'd unleash a tirade of insults and criticisms, tearing apart everything I had worked so hard to accomplish. The venom in his words was suffocating, his voice dripping with contempt. I felt like a puppet on a string, dancing to the tune of his volatile moods. But then, just as quickly as the storm arrived, it would pass. Mr. Pearson would stroll into my office with a smile on his face, acting as if nothing had happened. He'd praise my work, showering me with compliments that seemed disingenuous. The abrupt shift in his demeanor left me bewildered, my mind struggling to comprehend his unpredictable nature. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed a pattern emerging. Mr. Pearson's mood swings coincided with the phases of the moon. During the full moon, his behavior would take a sinister turn. He would retreat into his office, engrossed in some mysterious project. The air in the office would become heavy with tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the storm to break. On one particular full moon night, unable to resist my curiosity any longer, I decided to investigate. Armed with a keycard I had managed to acquire, I stealthily made my way to Mr. Pearson's office. As I approached, I could hear faint murmurs and the clinking of glass. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that would forever haunt my nightmares. Mr. Pearson stood in the center of the room, surrounded by an array of vials and jars. His eyes were bloodshot, his face contorted with a mixture of ecstasy and anguish. The room was filled with an acrid smell, a cocktail of chemicals and decay that made my stomach churn. I watched in horror as he dipped a brush into one of the vials, smearing an unknown substance across a canvas. The strokes were frenzied, wild, as if his very soul was bleeding onto the paper. The painting before me was a grotesque masterpiece, a twisted reflection of his tormented mind. And then, as if sensing my presence, Mr. Pearson turned towards me, his eyes glinting with a manic gleam. "Ah, my dear colleague," he said, his voice dripping with madness. "Do you like what you see? This is my art, my release." In that moment, I understood the truth. Mr. Pearson's bipolar disorder was not simply a condition to be managed, it was the catalyst for his disturbing art. The extremes of his emotions fueled his creativity, turning his mind into a cauldron of madness. As I stumbled out of his office, my mind racing with fear and revulsion, I knew I had to escape. The darkness that permeated Pearson Corporation was too suffocating, its grip too tight. I handed in my resignation the very next day, leaving behind a world of chaos and uncertainty. But even now, years later, The memory of Mr. Pearson and his twisted art haunts me. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes, the true horrors lie hidden beneath the polished facade of ordinary life. The monsters we fear may not be supernatural creatures or masked killers, but the very people we least expect. And in the case of Mr. Pearson, my bipolar boss, the line between genius and madness was disturbingly thin. So, if you find yourself in the presence of an unpredictable soul, be wary. Beneath their charm and charisma, darkness may lurk, ready to consume everything in its path. Trust your instincts and protect your own sanity, for you never know what twisted secrets lie within the minds of those who walk among us.